Get the owner on the phone, right now. Serena's voice sliced through the restaurant like a warning siren. Every head turned. I sat quietly in my corner booth, my coffee half finished, when my daughter-in-law swept into the dining room on my son Marcus's arm, surrounded by an entourage of fashionable friends. She wore a deep red designer dress, sparkling jewelry catching every glint of the chandeliers. And then she saw me. Her face twisted instantly, as though my presence personally offended her. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, loud enough for half the room to hear. Dozens of eyes shifted toward me. My simple gray cardigan, my comfortable shoes, my hair in a basic bun. I could feel the judgment. I didn't fit the polished image of their evening. Marcus rushed forward, but not to defend me. His cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. "Mom," he whispered sharply, "why would you come to a place like this? Look at how you're dressed. This is uncomfortable for everyone." "My only child." His words cut deeper than he realized. My hands trembled slightly around the cup, but I stayed silent. Serena was already snapping her fingers at the staff, her voice rising. "I need the manager. This woman does not belong here. This is a premium establishment, not—" She stopped herself, but her meaning hung in the air. "Get her out of here. Now." Soft murmurs rippled through the restaurant. Couples looked over with curiosity, confusion, and in some cases quiet disapproval. Some women glanced at me with sympathy, others with cold judgment. Marcus's friends exchanged awkward smiles, one of them muttering something about people who don't know their place. Marcus leaned closer, trying not to move his lips. "Please, Mom, we're here with important investors. You're going to ruin the whole night. Just go somewhere else. There are plenty of casual diners across town. Important people, important deals. It was always the same pattern. I never seemed to be enough for them, never stylish enough, modern enough, impressive enough." Serena continued waving her arms dramatically. "This is unbelievable. We come here for a celebration and this happens. Where is the owner? I want to speak to them immediately." She pointed at me as if I were some sort of mistake that urgently needed correcting. A young server approached nervously. Serena didn't let him say a word. "No excuses. I want the manager. Or better, the owner. Someone needs to take responsibility for this." The poor server practically sprinted toward the back offices. Marcus avoided my eyes completely. He kept a strained smile on his face for his investors, as if pretending nothing was happening. I remained seated, feeling as if 66 years of life had narrowed into this one moment of quiet humiliation. Seconds stretched. Serena filled every one of them with exaggerated sighs. "Can you believe this?" she told her friends. "Someone probably let her in by mistake. Or maybe she wandered in thinking this was a public cafe." Soft laughter circled the table. Familiar laughter, the kind used by people who enjoy feeling superior. Then finally, Tony Davis, the restaurant manager, approached. Impeccably dressed, calm, confident. Serena threw herself into her performance again. "Thank goodness. Please remove this woman immediately. She's ruining the atmosphere. Look at her, this is embarrassing." Tony listened without reacting. Then he looked at me. For just a moment, something changed in his eyes. Something Serena was too distracted to notice. Marcus added quickly, trying to sound authoritative. "Let's not make this worse. Just handle it quietly. Take her out through the kitchen if you need to." Through the kitchen, as though I didn't even deserve to leave through the front. Tony drew a slow breath. Then, with perfect calm, he turned fully toward me. His words dropped into the silent restaurant like a stone into still water. "Madam Proprietor, how would you like me to handle these guests?" "Proprietor?" The room fell silent. Serena froze mid-gesture. Marcus's eyes widened. Their friends stopped whispering. Tony waited patiently for my response, standing with full respect, hands clasped, posture straight, speaking to me as the true authority in the room. I still hadn't moved, my coffee now cold between my fingers. 66 years old, 5 years widowed, A lifetime of building something my own children had never truly understood. And there I was, inside my own restaurant, being treated like an inconvenience by the very people I had given everything to. The silence that followed Tony's words was so heavy, it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. Proprietor. That single word hung in the air, echoing like a bell no one dared silence. Serena blinked rapidly, her lips parting but producing no sound. Marcus had gone pale, gripping the back of a chair as though he needed it to stay upright. The investors exchanged confused, startled looks. Even Serena's friends, once so eager to laugh, sat frozen. Tony remained at my table, waiting respectfully for my direction, as someone who had known me for years and had earned my trust. But I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my heart pounding, not because of the revelation, but because this humiliating scene was simply the final blow after 5 long years of quiet disrespect. 5 years earlier, when I lost my husband, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the only person who ever truly saw me. Rob Robert had been my companion for 42 years. Together, we built everything from the ground up. We arrived in the city with empty pockets but full of determination. Rob cooked, I managed. We opened our first tiny restaurant in an overlooked corner of the North End. We worked 16 hours a day while Marcus, our only child, did his homework between the tables, surrounded by the hum of dishes and spices. But Marcus never appreciated any of it. To him, we were just restaurant people, part of the service industry. Nothing glamorous, nothing to impress his classmates from the elite private school he went to on scholarship. When Rob passed away suddenly, I was shattered. But I was also left with something Marcus never imagined, a chain of 7 fine dining restaurants across the city. What started as that little neighborhood spot had grown into a multi-million-dollar culinary group. Rob and I had built it piece by piece, always reinvesting, always expanding quietly. We never lived extravagantly. We stayed in our same modest home in the North End. We wore simple clothes. Because our wealth wasn't in flashing luxury, it was in ownership, in land, in thriving businesses. After the funeral, Marcus arrived with Serena. They had been married 2 years, but that day was the first time I saw her true nature. As I stood beside Rob's coffin, Serena leaned toward a friend and whispered, "Poor Marcus. Now he'll have to support her. She probably can't even take care of herself." The words pierced me, but I was too deep in grief to respond. Marcus didn't correct her. He simply nodded, as though agreeing that I was now a burden. The months that followed revealed even more. Marcus only visited when he needed money. "Mom, I have expenses, the condo, the car. Serena wants to redecorate. I need help." I always gave him something, $500, $1,000, whatever I could. He never once asked where the money came from. He assumed it was a small pension or leftover savings. He had no idea what Rob and I had built. I never told him. Part of me wanted to protect that piece of our life, the piece he had never appreciated. Another part of me already knew, deep down, that my son valued me less and less unless I was giving him something. Serena made it worse. She came from what she called a well-connected family, endless stories about her parents' events, her travels, her education. To her, I was an embarrassment, a widow from the old neighborhood who ran some tiny food place. At gatherings, she introduced me like an afterthought. "This is Eleanor, Marcus's mother. She lives in the old part of town where they had their little food business." Little business. As if 40 years of sweat and sacrifice were nothing. 2 years ago, my grandson, Elias, was born, my only grandchild. When Serena was expecting, I crocheted blankets, bought baby clothes, prepared everything with the joy of a first-time grandmother. I waited 12 hours at the hospital the day he was born. When I was finally allowed into the room, Serena looked exhausted and annoyed. "You have 15 minutes. We're expecting important visitors later." 15 minutes with my first grandchild. In the weeks that followed, every attempt I made to visit was blocked. "We're busy. He's napping. Try another day." Another day, another excuse. Marcus stopped answering my calls. My messages remained unread. The heartbreak gnawed at me until, 6 months ago, I finally went to their condo uninvited. I rang the bell. Again and again. Serena opened the door with a glare. "What part of we're busy don't you understand? This is too much, Eleanor. You're being intrusive, desperate. Please stop." She shut the door in my face. I heard Elias crying inside my grandson, and I was left standing outside like a stranger. That night, I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then I called my closest friend, Brenda. She knew everything about the restaurants, the real estate, the investments. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Eleanor," she said firmly, "you've spent your whole life building an empire. You are not weak. It's time you remember who you are." Brenda's words echoed in my mind. Stop begging for scraps of affection. But I couldn't. He was my son, my only family, so I kept giving him money whenever he asked. I kept swallowing every quiet insult, every dismissive look, every cold silence. I allowed myself to fade into the background because the alternative, the fear of losing them entirely, felt unbearable. 3 months ago, Marcus called me for the first time in weeks. My heart lifted with hope. "Mom, I need to see you." I thought, maybe they wanted to reconnect. Maybe they had realized how far we'd drifted. I cooked his favorite meal. I cleaned the house. I set the table as if welcoming my child home. He arrived alone. No Serena, no Elias. He sat in my small living room, glancing around with that familiar superiority he never even tried to hide anymore. "Mom, I need $5,000. It's urgent. I have investments." Investments. I looked at him, really looked for the first time in a long while. 38 years old, wearing a tailored suit and a watch that probably cost more than my car. Sitting there asking his poor mother for money again. "Investments?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, business stuff. You wouldn't get it. Just tell me if you have the money." I went to the drawer where I kept cash for daily expenses. I handed him the envelope. He didn't even look inside. He left without drinking the coffee I had prepared, without asking how I was, without a hug, without a single word of warmth. That night, Brenda called me, her voice urgent. "Eleanor, you need to hear this. My niece works in PR. She saw Marcus and Serena at an event. They were bragging. They're opening their own luxury restaurant. They have investors. They say it's going to be the most exclusive place in the city." My stomach dropped. My money, my support, my silent sacrifices, all being used to fund a dream that shut me out completely. A restaurant meant to compete with mine built with funds they believed came from a naive, aging widow. They didn't even know I owned the very empire they were trying to overshadow. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't say a word. Not yet. I wanted to see how far their disrespect would go. How deeply they would push me before I finally revealed the truth they had never cared to ask about. I continued living simply, visiting my restaurants discreetly, meeting with Tony and my managers behind closed doors. I kept wearing my modest clothes and staying in my humble home, but inside, something was changing. The sadness was hardening, the disappointment was turning into finality, and then came tonight. A quiet dinner that turned into a public spectacle where my own family dragged me through the mud in front of strangers. Tony's question still lingered in the air. "Madam Proprietor, how would you like me to handle these guests?" I lifted my eyes to Tony. Years of loyalty, professionalism, and genuine care reflected in his gaze. But I saw something else too, something painful. He wanted me to stand up for myself, to stop letting people I loved treat me like I didn't matter. My voice, when it came, was softer than I wanted. "Tony, please let them finish their dinner in peace." I was already leaving. His expression tightened with disappointment, but he nodded politely. I stood, legs trembling, and picked up my worn handbag. I walked past Marcus without looking at him, past Serena, whose confusion had mixed with a faint sense of victory, as if she believed she had put me in my place. I stepped outside into the cold night, and the moment the door closed behind me, the tears finally fell. It wasn't the first time they had hurt me, and sadly, I knew it wouldn't have been the last. This night was simply the final drop in a glass that had been filling for years. I remembered another time, the Christmas dinner 18 months ago. Serena had invited me, but with rules. "Eleanor, please try to look presentable. Marcus's parents, my family will be here too. We don't want them to misunderstand things." Misunderstand what? That her husband came from a working family? That his mother didn't wear designer labels? I bought a new green sweater for the occasion. It wasn't expensive, but it fit well. I baked a cake from my grandmother's recipe. I arrived with hope that this time would be different. Serena opened the door and stared at me as though my presence surprised her. "Oh, you came." She led me inside, but not to the dining room where everyone was gathered. She directed me to the kitchen instead. "Leave the cake here. Wait a moment before coming out. Not everyone has arrived." So I stood there alone like I was staff waiting for instructions. I heard laughter from the dining room, chatter, clinking glasses. 20 minutes passed, 30. Finally, I walked out on my own. The moment I stepped into the dining room, conversation stopped. Serena leapt from her chair. "Eleanor, so glad you came out. Let me introduce you to everyone." She smiled that tight, insincere smile I knew all too well. "This is Marcus's mother. She lives in the North End. She has a very cozy little house." Cozy little house, her favorite phrase for not impressive. Serena's mother, wrapped in jewelry, stared at me like I didn't quite belong there. "How quaint," she said. "And what did your husband do?" Past tense, as if Rob didn't deserve to be remembered. "We had restaurants," I answered simply. Serena cut in immediately. "A small restaurant, comfort food. Very casual. It's not around anymore." A lie. She didn't know the truth. She never cared to. And Marcus? He said nothing. The rest of that dinner felt endless. They placed me at the far end of the table, as distant from the conversation as possible. No one spoke to me. Each time I tried to join in, Serena immediately shifted the topic, shutting me out with a smile that never reached her eyes. My cake, the one I had spent hours preparing, never even made it out of the kitchen. When dessert was served, Serena presented an extravagant pastry from a luxury bakery as if it were the only option for the evening. When I said goodbye, Marcus didn't stand, didn't hug me, didn't even look up. "Bye, Mom. Drive safe." That was all. I went home, set the untouched cake on the counter, and finally threw it away. I leaned over the sink and cried, wondering where everything had gone wrong. At what moment I had stopped being a mother and become an embarrassment. In my despair, I called Brenda, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. She came immediately, wrapped her arms around me, and let me cry into her shoulder. "Eleanor, this has to stop," she whispered. "You can't let them treat you this way." But I couldn't bring myself to draw a line. I clung to the hope that they would change, that Marcus would remember who held him when he was scared, who raised him, who loved him without conditions. Then came Elias's first birthday. My grandson turned 1. Serena posted pictures online, an elaborate celebration with themed decorations, entertainers, a full dessert table, and dozens of guests. I wasn't invited. I didn't even know there was a party until I saw the photos. My grandson, blowing out his first candle, surrounded by people I had never met. I sent Marcus a message. "I saw the photos from Elias's birthday. He looked beautiful. I wish I could have been there." 3 hours later, he replied, "It was a small party, Mom. Just close family." Close family. The words hit me like a blow. I wasn't close family. Not to him, not to Serena. Something inside me cracked. 2 weeks later, they arrived at my house without warning. It was a Saturday morning, my house messy, me still in pajamas. Marcus pushed inside the moment I opened the door, scanning my home with thinly veiled disapproval. "Mom, we need to talk." Serena followed, holding Elias. My heart jumped at the sight of my grandson. I reached for him instinctively, but Serena shifted away, gently shielding him. "He's tired," she said simply. They sat on my old sofa. Marcus wasted no time. "Mom, we've been thinking." We have a lot going on, careers, a child. We can't constantly worry about you. Worry? As if they ever had. I don't understand, I whispered. Serena sighed in that theatrical way of hers. Eleanor, you're older. You live alone. Eventually you'll need help, professional care. We want to be honest. We can't take on that responsibility. It took me a moment to process their words. They had come to tell me to look into assisted living. They had decided I was already too old to manage my own life. I was 64, healthy, active, running 7 thriving restaurants. But to them, I was already a future problem that needed a plan. I'm fine, I managed. Marcus shook his head. Mom, be realistic. This house is falling apart. Your car is ancient, and you barely have enough to live on. We can't keep supporting you forever. Supporting me. I, who had given him thousands of dollars over the years. But I stayed silent, guarding my secret as if it were the last piece of dignity I had left. Serena continued gently, and when, the time comes, we don't want Marcus stuck with complicated paperwork. It would help if you gave us a copy of your will now, just to make things easier. She smiled as she said it, as if discussing a simple household chore. Marcus nodded. It's logical, Mom. We're your only family. Elias is your only grandchild. Everything you have will be ours eventually. Better to sort it out now. I looked at them. My son with impatience in his eyes, my daughter-in-law with her practiced smile, my grandson who didn't know my face, and something inside me solidified. I'll think about it, I said calmly. Marcus frowned. There's nothing to think about, Mom. But he didn't push. They left soon after, leaving me alone with a silence that felt heavier than any words. That afternoon I called my lawyer. I need to update my will, I said, and I want it to be airtight. Over the next weeks, I rebuilt everything quietly, meticulously. My restaurants, my properties, my accounts. I created trusts for loyal employees. I designated funds for charities, and for Marcus, I left exactly what he believed I had, a modest house, and $10,000 in savings. Everything else, the real fortune would go to people who respected what Rob and I had built. Still, I didn't tell Marcus. Some part of me still hoped he'd change, still hoped that the boy who once hugged me and said, "I love you, Mom," would return. And so, I kept answering when he called for money. I kept tolerating the disrespect. I remained the invisible mother he needed only when convenient, until tonight, until he tried to drive me out of my own restaurant as if I didn't belong in the place I had created. I walked toward my car, 2 blocks down, tears blurring the streetlights. My phone rang. Brenda. "Where are you? Tony called me. He told me everything." Her voice shook with anger. "Eleanor, enough. Stop protecting them. Stop hiding. They need to know the truth." "I can't," I whispered. "They're my family. He's my son." Brenda exhaled sharply on the other end. "Eleanor, listen carefully. Family does not treat you this way. Family does not tear you down. Family does not embarrass you in public. Family doesn't treat you like an endless source of money while dismissing you at the same time," Brenda said gently. She was right. I knew it. But a mother's heart doesn't follow logic. "Just give me a little more time," I whispered. "Please." Brenda paused for a long moment. Then her voice softened. "All right. But promise me that when the time comes to stand up for yourself, you will. Promise me you won't let them take everything from you." I promised, though I had no idea if I could keep that promise. I drove home with tears sliding down my cheeks, each mile feeling like a step further away from the last bit of hope I had held on to. The next days felt surreal. Marcus didn't call to apologize. He didn't explain. He didn't even call to ask for money. Nothing. It was as if the incident at the restaurant had never happened. As if trying to push me out in public was such a normal act that it didn't deserve acknowledgement. I continued my routine, quietly visiting my other restaurants, reviewing reports, meeting managers behind closed doors where no one questioned who I was. On the outside, I was still Eleanor, the simple widow. Inside, I felt like a building slowly developing cracks that no one could see. 2 weeks later, Brenda arrived with new information. She sat across from me, her expression serious. "You need to hear this," she said. My stomach tightened. Marcus and Serena are in significant financial trouble. I leaned forward, my heartbeat picking up. "What kind of trouble?" Brenda opened her phone and showed me screenshots. They've accumulated more than $200,000 in debt, maxed out cards, personal loans, everything, all for the lifestyle they show online. 200,000. The number landed like a weight on my chest. How is that possible?" Brenda explained, her voice firm. "The European trips, the luxury condo with sky-high rent, Marcus's sports car, Serena's designer wardrobe, the parties, it's all smoke and mirrors, Eleanor. They're underwater." I sank back, absorbing it all. The arrogance, the dismissive comments, the superiority, all built on unstable ground. Brenda exhaled as if preparing herself, then said, "There's more." Her tone darkened. "The restaurant plan is real, but they have no capital. None. They're desperate for investors." And suddenly, everything from that night at my restaurant clicked into place. The exaggerated reaction, the urgency, the frantic need to remove me. They were performing. They needed those investors to see them as polished, successful, enviable. And a simple-looking mother didn't fit the story they were trying to sell. Brenda hesitated before continuing. My niece overheard something else, something hard to repeat. I braced myself. She overheard Serena telling a friend that when you eventually passed away, they planned to sell your house immediately, that the money could help pay off debts and cover a restaurant down payment. My breath caught. My house. The home where Rob and I lived for 40 years, where we raised Marcus, where every corner held a memory. To them, it was simply a future financial asset. And then Brenda said the words that made my knees weak. Serena added, "Hopefully she doesn't take too long. That area is appreciating. We could get at least 300,000. Brenda grasped my hand, eyes glistening. "Eleanor, they're planning their future around the assumption that you won't be here. They're treating your life like a countdown." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, my small garden glowed softly. Rob used to plant tomatoes there every summer. 66 years old, maybe 15 or 20 more years ahead of me if life was kind. But to my son, even that seemed inconvenient. I was more valuable as a memory than as a mother. Brenda's voice broke through the silence. "What are you going to do?" I turned toward her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than pain, determination. "I'm going to watch," I said. "I want to see exactly how far they're willing to go, and when the right moment comes, I will show them a truth they'll never forget." Over the next few weeks, everything became clearer. I quietly hired a private investigator not out of spite, but because I needed the full picture. The reports came weekly. Each one was worse than the last. Marcus had provided false information on loan applications. Serena had pawned jewelry and later reported it missing to claim insurance. They had borrowed money from acquaintances, promising fake investment returns. They were leaving a trail of disappointed people behind them. But the part that broke me was about Elias. They used him. Serena took him to charity events, took staged photos, posted emotional captions, and then accepted donations from followers who believed she was supporting a real cause. The money went into her personal account. My grandson, an innocent child used as a prop for attention. That revelation shifted everything inside me. This was no longer about my pride or my pain. It was about right and wrong, about protecting others from harm, about preventing more damage. I began moving with purpose. First, I secured all my assets with my legal team. Then I had my lawyer quietly review the investors Marcus and Serena were approaching. Some were genuinely good people being misled with manipulated projections and unrealistic promises. I almost contacted them to warn them, but Brenda stopped me. "Not yet," she said. "You need the moment when the truth has the greatest impact." She was right. Timing mattered. Then, finally, Marcus called me. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the restaurant when Marcus finally called me. His voice was tense. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." My heart foolish, hopeful skipped. "Are you and Elias okay?" I asked quickly. A pause. "Yeah, we're fine. I just need to see you. Can I come by tomorrow?" Of course I agreed. I cooked his favorite dishes. I cleaned every corner of the house. Deep down, a fragile part of me still wished he might apologize, acknowledge the pain he caused, say the words I had been longing to hear. "I'm sorry, Mom." He arrived exactly on time, alone. No Serena, no Elias. He sat in the same spot where he had once told me I was a burden, but today he looked different, uneasy, unsettled. "Mom, I need your help." No greeting, no apology, just those familiar words. "I need." "What's wrong?" I asked softly. He rubbed his face, overwhelmed. "I have temporary liquidity issues, about $500,000. It's for an opportunity I can't miss. I'll pay you back in 3 months, with interest, I swear." $500,000. More than he had ever asked for in his entire life. "That's a lot of money, Marcus." He leaned closer, switching into the persuasive tone I now recognized. "Mom, this is huge. I could triple the investment. I could finally give you a better life, get you out of this house and into somewhere nicer. Get me out of my own home, as if I were a package that needed relocating." "And if I don't have that kind of money?" I asked carefully. His expression stiffened. "Mom, I know you have something saved." Dad was cautious. "There must be funds somewhere, or you could take out a loan against the house." Against my house. He wanted me to mortgage my home to solve his crisis, a crisis he had created. "Let me think about it," I said. His face tightened. "There's no time to think. I need it this week, 3 days, tops." He stood and paced like an animal trapped in a small cage. "You always do this. You always make things complicated. Just say yes. It's simple." I looked at him, really looked. My son. The baby I held, the child I comforted, the teenager whose every dream I encouraged, and none of that child remained in the man standing before me. "I need to think," I said again, firmer. He lost patience. "For goodness sake, Mom, what is there to think about? I'm your son, your only family. Don't you trust me?" The irony was almost enough to make me laugh. "I'll give you an answer in 3 days," I replied calmly. He scoffed, grabbed his jacket. "Fine, just don't make me beg. I don't have time for drama." He closed the door sharply. I sat alone in my silent living room, the food in the kitchen untouched, and in that stillness I made my decision. It was time to stop being the victim. It was time for Marcus and Serena to face the truth. I called Tony. "I need your help organizing something that will change everything." His response was immediate. "Whatever you need, Mrs. Johnson. Anything." Over the next 3 days, I worked quietly. Tony and I met in the administrative office of my flagship restaurant, the one Rob and I had poured our hearts into decades earlier. Our masterpiece, the jewel of the entire chain, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the skyline, a kitchen designed down to the last detail, a wine list praised by critics, a place neither Marcus nor Serena knew belonged to me. Tony sat across from me, a folder of documents in hand. "I need to understand exactly what outcome you're aiming for," he said. "I can arrange whatever you ask, but I need to know the final goal." I leaned back in the leather chair Rob once used, surrounded by memories of our shared work. "I want Marcus and Serena to see who I really am, but not privately. I need it to be public, undeniable, something they can't rewrite or diminish afterward." Tony nodded slowly. "Are you certain? Once your identity becomes public, everything in your life will change, not just with them." I hesitated only a moment. My quiet life, my anonymity, it would all vanish. But what good was peace if it came with disrespect and constant humiliation? "I'm sure," I said finally. It's time my son learns that respect is not optional. Tony opened his folder. According to my contacts, Marcus and Serena have scheduled an important dinner this Friday, right here. They're meeting potential investors. It's their final chance at funding. If this fails, their plan collapses. Perfect. Almost too perfect. How did you find out? I asked. Tony gave a small smile. Serena made the reservation 2 weeks ago for 8 people. She requested the main table, the one in the center. She wants everyone to see her meeting. She wants the image of success. Of course she did. Everything for Serena was presentation, a crafted illusion. Then here is my plan, I said. I leaned forward. I will be here that night at my usual corner table, dressed simply, blending into the background. Tony frowned. And if they try to remove you again? If the same thing happens as before? I smiled. A cold, steady smile. I hope they try. I hope they humiliate me again in front of their investors, because then and only then you will reveal who I truly am. Not with words, I added. I want the documents, the registrations, the deeds, everything. I want physical proof they cannot deny, I told Tony. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. Mrs. Johnson, what you're planning will completely dismantle them, especially in front of the people they're trying to impress. A tiny ache formed in my chest. A mother's instinct, buried deep, still reacted, but I pushed it down. They dismantled me first, I whispered, piece by piece, every slight, every dismissal, every humiliation. They did it because they believed I was too weak to notice. It's time they face the reality they chose to ignore. We spent hours refining the plan. Tony would quietly confirm the attendance of the investors without revealing anything. I would coordinate with my lawyers to prepare certified documents, ownership papers, registration forms, deeds, everything. On Wednesday, Marcus called again. His voice held a desperate edge. Mom, the 3 days are up. Do you have the money? I inhaled slowly. No, Marcus. I'm not giving you $500,000. There was silence, then a shift in his tone, cold and sharp. You're telling me no? It was the first time in my life I had ever refused him. That's right, I said gently. I can't give you that amount. You can't or you won't, he snapped. There's a difference. His anger simmered through the phone. Mom, I've barely asked anything of you over the years. I've never demanded anything. And the one time I truly need support, you abandon me. Barely asked, years of unreturned loans, years of treating me like a source of money, not a mother. My decision is final, I said softly. Marcus erupted. This is unbelievable. You're my mother. It's your job to support me, but it's always been like this. You only think of yourself. Dad was the generous one. You just hold on to everything like it's treasure. I, who had supported him at every turn. I, who had given him more than he ever acknowledged. I'm sorry you feel that way, I replied, voice trembling but steady. If you need real help, we can discuss responsible options. I can help you build a budget. I don't need your simple lifestyle advice, he cut in sharply. I needed the money and you let me down. The call ended abruptly. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling the last threads of hope unravel. I called Brenda. My voice was barely more than a breath. I did it. I told him no. She exhaled with relief. Good. Eleanor, I'm proud of you. I know that wasn't easy. Easy? It felt like tearing my heart out. Friday, I said quietly. Friday is when everything changes. Brenda promised to be nearby. The next 2 days passed in a strange stillness. For the first time in years, I felt like I was directing the events, not being pushed around by them. Friday arrived, gray and chilly. I dressed exactly as I always did. Gray slacks, a cream-colored cardigan, comfortable shoes, nothing that would draw attention. I stood before the mirror. 66 years of life stared back lines around my eyes, silver in my hair, hands shaped by decades of work. This was me, not just the hidden business owner, but the woman who had endured, survived, and created an entire life from nothing. Tonight, both versions of me would step into the same room. I drove to the restaurant. My heart pounded with every passing mile. I arrived early at 7. Marcus's reservation was for 8:30. Tony welcomed me at the private entrance. "Everything is ready, Mrs. Johnson. The documents are in my office. The key staff are prepared for your signal." I nodded, unable to speak. He guided me to my familiar corner table, the quiet one where I always sat unnoticed, watching the world around me. I ordered tea, not food. My stomach was too tight to handle anything else. I watched the restaurant fill with life. Elegant couples celebrating anniversaries, families laughing, business partners sharing meals, normal moments unfolding while I prepared for the night that would rewrite my entire life. At 8:20, the door opened. There he was. Marcus walked in with Serena on his arm, surrounded by 6 impeccably dressed investors. Serena wore an emerald dress that probably cost more than my car, her jewelry sparkling under the lights. Marcus was polished, confident playing the role he wanted the world to see. They didn't notice me, not yet. Tony greeted them personally and led them to the central table exactly where Serena wanted them, front and center, visible to everyone, the perfect stage. I inhaled deeply. The moment was coming. They settled into their seats. Serena laughed loudly, placing her hand on an investor's arm with calculated charm. Marcus opened folders of financial projections, gesturing toward charts with well-rehearsed enthusiasm. I recognized 2 of the investors from the photos my investigator had gathered. Serious business people, real capital, the kind who could reshape a future with a single decision. Serena ordered the most expensive champagne without hesitation. Marcus hesitated for a split second at the price, but Serena smiled brightly. "Only the best for tonight. We're celebrating the start of something amazing." 20 minutes passed. Just enough time. Just enough rope, just enough illusion. I lifted my teacup and took a slow sip, trying to steady my breathing. And then, it happened. Serena stepped away from the table, gliding toward the restroom in those impossibly tall heels she loved, the kind that made her look more like a model than a real person. Her path crossed directly in front of my table. Our eyes met. For a moment, everything froze. Her eyes widened in surprise, then sharpened into unmistakable irritation. She stopped mid-step, her expression tightening. Without a word, she spun on her heel and hurried back to Marcus, leaning down to whisper something urgently. Marcus turned, scanning the room. When he found me, I watched emotions flash across his face in rapid succession. Shock, embarrassment, and finally frustration. He rose abruptly, offering his investors a strained apology before walking toward me with tense, deliberate steps. Serena followed closely behind, her energy like a storm brewing just over his shoulder. My heart pounded, but I kept my hand calmly around my teacup. Marcus stopped at my table, lowering his voice, though every word vibrated with tension. "Mom, what are you doing here?" As though I needed permission to be in a public place. "I'm having dinner," I replied evenly. Serena leaned in, her tone cutting. "Really? After refusing to help your own son, you show up here at this restaurant? Do you even know how much this place costs?" I almost smiled. I knew every financial detail of this restaurant more intimately than anyone in the room. Marcus shot a glance toward his table where the investors watched with growing interest. "Mom, this night is incredibly important. Please don't make this difficult. Just leave." Every word felt like a slap, but I had come too far to retreat. "I have every right to be here, just like any other guest." Serena let out a short, sharp laugh, the sound I knew all too well. "Guest? Please. I doubt you could afford the least expensive item on the menu." She raised her hand and snapped her fingers for a waiter. "Excuse me? We need to speak to the manager. Immediately." The waiter Javier had been working here for 3 years. He looked at me briefly, a subtle recognition. I gave him the slightest nod. "Right away, ma'am," he said professionally and walked off. Marcus rubbed his forehead, his whole posture tense. "Mom, I'm begging you. These investors are my only chance. If this deal goes through, I can pay you back everything, but I need you to leave, now. Pay me back, as if that had ever been part of the plan. Serena no longer bothered to hide her irritation. This is absurd, she said loudly. First, she shows up weeks ago and embarrasses us in front of our friends. Now this? It's like she's following us. Following them. Just by existing. People at nearby tables were now turning, whispering behind their hands. An older couple exchanged concerned looks. A man shook his head disapprovingly. Marcus noticed the attention and lowered his voice urgently. Serena, please, not so loud. But Serena was lost in her performance. Why not? I'm tired of dealing with this. Your mother doesn't respect boundaries. She doesn't understand her place. My place. I inhaled deeply, the truth burning on my tongue. But not yet. Not yet. Tony approached then, calm and composed. Good evening. I understand there's an issue. Serena stepped forward, pointing toward me. Yes, there is. This woman shouldn't be here. She's disrupting a very important evening for us. We need her removed immediately. Tony looked at me first measured, respectful, and then spoke evenly. Has the guest caused any disturbance? Serena let out an exasperated sound. Disturbance? Her presence is the disturbance. Look at her. This is a high-end establishment. You have dress codes, standards. Tony tapped his tablet, reviewing something. According to our records, the guest visits regularly. She has never caused any problems. Serena's irritation deepened. I don't care how many times she's been here, she probably pays with coupons. We are real customers, we spend real money. At the central table, the investors were now fully invested in this spectacle, rather than Marcus's pitch. One of them, a distinguished man with silver hair, stood up and joined us. Mr. Arthur Davies. I recognized him immediately. Marcus, he said in a commanding voice, is there a problem? Marcus spun around with practiced ease. No, Mr. Davies, just a minor family misunderstanding. We're taking care of it. Mr. Davies looked at me slowly, then back at Marcus. Family? Serena rushed in before Marcus could speak. It's Marcus's mother. She has some challenges. At her age, she gets confused and shows up in places she shouldn't. We're just trying to sort things out. Challenges, confused. Age. She was dressing me as someone who wasn't capable, in front of investors. Mr. Davies frowned, not at me, but at them. I see, he said lightly, though his tone had shifted. Tony cleared his throat gently. If you'll allow me, I'll speak with my supervisor to determine the correct course of action. Serena rolled her eyes. Supervisor? Bring the owner. I want someone with actual authority. The owner. The irony was almost too perfect to bear. Tony nodded with impeccable professionalism. Of course, I'll be right back. Tony walked toward the administrative offices, and for a moment, time felt suspended. Serena returned to her table, leaning in close to the investors, likely offering an exaggerated explanation about her difficult mother-in-law interrupting their important evening. Marcus lingered by my table, his face tight with frustration and something that almost resembled desperation. Mom? His voice was barely audible. Why are you doing this? Why can't you just support me for once? For once. As if a lifetime of sacrifice meant nothing. Marcus, I said softly, but firmly. I'm staying. I'm having my dinner, and you're going to return to your investors and continue your meeting. His jaw clenched. You're incredibly selfish. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving those words floating in the air like a final judgment, selfish for the simple act of finally existing on my own terms. Of setting a boundary after decades of being ignored. That's when I saw Tony returning. He carried a leather binder, and even from across the restaurant, I knew exactly what it contained. Our eyes met. He gave me the slightest nod. It was time. The restaurant was buzzing with quiet curiosity. Conversations dipped. Servers paused mid-step. It felt as though the entire room held its breath. Tony headed not for me, but for Marcus's table. Serena's eyes lit up as he approached. Finally, Did you speak with the owner? Are you going to remove her? Tony placed the binder gently on the table. Ma'am, sir, he began calmly. I've reviewed the situation with the appropriate authority. Allow me to clarify a few things about this establishment. Marcus cut him off, tense and agitated. Look, we just want to resolve this quickly. If you can ask my mother to leave, we'll be very grateful. We can even leave a generous tip for the trouble. A tip, as if respect could be purchased. Tony remained composed. Before we proceed, there is something important you should understand about this restaurant. He opened the binder and revealed the first document, the official business registration, complete with seals and dates going back more than 2 decades. This establishment, along with 6 others in the city, is part of a family-run business group. Serena barely glanced at the document. That's interesting, she said impatiently, but I don't see how that solves our issue. Tony continued unbothered. It actually has everything to do with it. The majority owner prefers privacy. She doesn't seek attention, but she is present far more often than most people realize. He turned the next page, revealing photographs. Rob and me at the opening of our first restaurant, awards ceremonies, snapshots of decades of work. Mr. Davies leaned forward, studying the photos. That woman in the pictures, he murmured. Serena finally picked up a document. Her eyes darted across the lines, irritation turning into disbelief. I don't understand. Tony pointed to the property registry. As you can see, the current proprietor is Mrs. Eleanor Johnson, widow of Robert Johnson. She inherited the full ownership 5 years ago and has continued expanding the business with remarkable success. My name, on legal documents that could not be denied. Marcus stood frozen. His color drained from his face as reality settled over him. Wait. Eleanor Johnson? He whispered. Serena shook her head, her voice shaky. This is impossible. There must be another Eleanor Johnson. It's a common name. This must be a mix-up. Tony took out more documents. Deeds. Financial statements bearing my signature. Recent photos from managerial meetings. There is no mistake, ma'am, he said gently, and to remove any remaining doubt, he turned to face me. Tony's entire posture shifted, shoulders straightening, tone respectful. He walked to my table as the entire restaurant watched. Madam Proprietor, he said clearly, I am truly sorry you had to experience this. How would you like us to proceed? His words fell into the quiet room like a stone dropped in still water. Every head turned toward me, but the only pair of eyes I searched for were my son's. Marcus stood there, stunned, his chair pushed back, unable to speak. Serena had gone pale, her hands trembling around the documents. The investors exchanged looks, calculating, reconsidering everything they had been told. I rose slowly, my legs steadier than I expected. Thank you, Tony, I said with calm clarity. You've handled this with professionalism. I walked toward the central table. With each step, Marcus shifted backward, as though seeing me for the first time. Mom, I didn't know, he stammered. He couldn't finish. Serena found her voice first. It came out sharp and panicked. This can't be possible. You can't be the owner. You live in that tiny house. You drive that old car. You dress like... She stopped, but she didn't have to finish. Like someone who built something real, I said softly. Not a performance, not an illusion. Mr. Davies straightened his jacket, his expression respectful now. Mrs. Johnson, he said, allow me to properly introduce myself. I'm Arthur Davies of Davies Capital Investments. I've heard of your work in the industry for years. Your restaurants are known across the industry for their quality and exceptional leadership, Mr. Davies said warmly. He stood and shook my hand with genuine respect. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Serena watching the gesture with rising alarm. Another investor, a poised woman with sharp eyes, also stood. Iris Chen, from Crestwood Investment Fund, she introduced herself. Mrs. Johnson, it's a privilege. I've been hoping to meet with you for months. Your numbers are extraordinary. Marcus had backed up so far he bumped into his own chair. His knuckles whitened around the back of it, as though it were the only thing keeping him balanced. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think—" I looked directly at him, really looked for the first time in months. "Why did I let you think I had nothing?" I said gently. "Because I wanted to know if you loved me without money. I wanted to see if your mother mattered to you for who she was, not for what she could give." The words came out with years of held-back emotion. "And I got my answer, Marcus. Every time you asked for money without asking how I was. Every time Serena spoke down to me and you said nothing. Every time you kept me away from my grandson." Serena tried to regain her earlier confidence, but her voice sounded thin. "You misled us. You made us think you were no one." I turned to her slowly. "I didn't mislead you, Serena. You assumed. You saw simple clothes and believed that meant no value. You saw modesty and mistook it for insignificance. You saw quietness and assumed it was ignorance." My voice lifted slightly, strengthened by truth. "You never asked me about my life. You never wondered how I paid for anything. You never questioned where the money you constantly demanded came from. You didn't care as long as I stayed small enough to elevate you." The restaurant had fallen into complete silence. Even the servers stood still. Marcus stepped forward, his hand reaching out. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know." I held up a hand to stop him. "You didn't know what, Marcus? That treating me without respect was wrong? Did you need to know I had wealth to treat me with kindness?" Tears streamed down his face. "It wasn't meant to be like this. Serena and I—" Serena cut in, her voice shaking. "Eleanor, can we talk about this? We've been under so much pressure, we've made mistakes." "Pressure?" I asked softly. I unlocked my phone, opening the reports from my investigator. "Are you referring to the $200,000 in debt? The jewelry insurance claim? The charity funds that never reached any charity?" Serena's face went completely pale. The investors all stood now, gathering their things. Mr. Davies lifted his briefcase. "Marcus," he said calmly, "I don't believe this is the right environment for further discussion. We'll need to revisit any potential partnership." The others murmured in agreement, quickly distancing themselves. Serena watched them leave, panic replacing her usual confidence. Their grand evening, the one they had built up in their minds, collapsed right there at the center table. The untouched plates and the expensive bottle of champagne sat forgotten, losing their sparkle just as quickly as my son's illusions. Serena dropped into her seat, her elegant emerald dress now looking more like an ill-fitting costume. Marcus remained standing, shaking, as the truth settled around him like falling dust. The restaurant watched in a mixture of sympathy and stunned fascination. I remained still, feeling the weight of 66 years of life converging into this very moment. "Mom," Marcus finally managed, his voice cracking, "please, we can fix this. I can explain." I stepped closer but kept my distance so I could see his entire face. "Explain what? Explain why you tried to push me out of this restaurant 3 weeks ago? Explain why I've been kept away from my grandson for 2 years? Explain why, every time you looked at me, you felt embarrassment instead of love?" Each question was a truth I had carried in silence for years. Marcus shook his head, tears falling freely. "I love you, Mom. You're important to me. You always have been." My throat tightened, but I kept my composure. "Don't confuse needing me with loving me, Marcus. Needing money isn't love. Needing support isn't love. Love means respect, even when you believe someone has nothing to offer you." I gestured toward Serena, who now cried softly, mascara streaking her cheeks. "She showed you who she was, and you chose to follow her lead. You chose appearances over substance, status over values. And the hardest part is realizing you preferred her approval to your mother's love." Serena lifted her head, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, truly. I grew up believing status was everything. Appearance meant success. I didn't know how to be different." For the first time, she sounded sincere. But apologies that appear only after everything falls apart never sound the same as apologies born from genuine reflection. "Serena," I said, my tone steady but not unkind, "you had so many chances to really know me, to look past my clothes, my house, or the life you assumed I lived. Every time I brought you a meal made with care, every time I knitted something for Elias, every time I offered help that came from the heart, you could have chosen to see me as a person. Instead, you chose to see me as an inconvenience." Tony stepped closer, speaking in a quiet voice meant only for me. "Mrs. Johnson, would you like a private room? I can arrange something immediately." I considered it. A private space would have allowed this moment to unfold without the weight of so many eyes, but deep inside, I knew the truth. I had been diminished publicly too many times. This ending needed to take place exactly where the hurt had begun. "No, Tony," I said softly. "Thank you, but this stays here." He nodded in understanding and stepped back, remaining nearby in silent support. Marcus moved toward me then, tentative, reaching out as if hoping a single gesture could undo years of choices. "Mom, please," he whispered, "give me another chance. We'll change. Serena and we can learn. Just don't turn away from us." Don't turn away. The weight of the words hit me with painful irony. "Marcus," I said quietly, "you turned away from me years ago. You simply never noticed. You were too busy shaping a life where I no longer fit." I drew a slow breath, fully aware that the next words would alter everything between us. "I didn't come tonight to hurt you. I came because you needed to understand that every choice has an impact, that you cannot treat people as temporary placeholders and expect them to always be there when you finally look back." I reached into my handbag and took out an envelope thick, sealed, official. Marcus stared at it as if it were a live wire. What is this?" His voice trembled. "It's a letter from my attorney," I said. "It outlines the updated structure of my estate." His eyes widened in fear. "Mom, no." I raised my hand gently. "Listen to all of it before you react." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Your inheritance," I continued, "is now exactly what you always believed I had, the house you grew up in, and $10,000 in cash." A gasp escaped Serena. "The rest, every restaurant, every property, every investment, will go into a trust supporting the people who truly helped build everything. Longtime employees, community organizations, and an educational fund for Elias that he will receive at 25, protected by independent trustees." Marcus's hands shook as he pulled the documents from the envelope. Serena read over his shoulder, her face shifting from confusion to shock, to a hollow sort of fear. "You can't do this," she whispered. "We're your family. Elias is your grandson." My heart clenched, but I held firm. "It's because Elias is my grandson that I made these decisions. I want him to have opportunities, but I will not allow anyone to use him, control him, or treat him as a financial tool." Marcus dropped the papers, covering his face with his hands. A sound escaped him, raw, wounded. A part of me, the part that had comforted him through every childhood hurt, wanted to pull him close. But I stayed still. "This doesn't mean I'm cutting you out of my life," I said gently. "It means we need to rebuild from the foundation with honesty, with respect, and without money clouding every interaction." I looked directly at Serena. "And if you want me in Elias's life, it will be on different terms. Not as the person you hide away, but as someone who belongs. Otherwise, not at all." Serena opened her mouth, but emotion choked her words. Marcus lifted his head, eyes red and swollen. "What do we have to do?" he asked quietly. "Tell me how to fix this." I shook my head. "It's not about doing something to win back access to my resources," I said. "It's about choosing to become someone better, not for me, for yourselves, for Elias." I knelt slightly so I could meet Marcus's eyes at the same level. "When your father passed, I lost the partner of my life, but I believed I still had our son. realizing that I mattered only when you needed something from me. That felt heavier than any loss I had ever known. My voice cracked. Tears blurred my vision. It hurt every time Serena spoke down to me and you stayed silent. It hurt seeing photos of Elias online while I wasn't allowed near him. It hurt acting like I didn't notice your coldness, when it was the only thing I felt. Marcus reached for my hand, and this time I allowed it. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, "more sorry than I can express." I squeezed his hand once, gently, then let it fall away. "And maybe, one day, those words will be enough to rebuild something real between us," I said. "But tonight isn't that day." I stood, steadying myself. Tony appeared at my side instantly, offering a clean handkerchief. I took it, touched by the small gesture. The restaurant had fallen into a breathless, delicate quiet. Every table, every server, every pair of eyes had witnessed something deeply personal and deeply painful. I turned toward them, clearing my throat. "My sincerest apologies for the disruption. Please continue your evening. Champagne is on the house tonight. Compliments of the management." A slow, soft applause began at a corner table, then another, until the entire room echoed with quiet, respectful claps. It wasn't a cheer or a celebration. It was something quieter, deeper. It was recognition, a collective understanding, a room full of strangers silently acknowledging that someone had reclaimed their dignity. I walked toward the exit with my head high, Tony walking a respectful step behind me. Then I heard it. "Mom, wait." I stopped, though I couldn't bring myself to turn fully. "I'm going to change," Marcus said. "I promise." My voice came out calm, steady. "Don't do it for me, Marcus. Do it for yourself. Do it for Elias. Do it because it's right." And with that, I stepped out into the night. The air was crisp and cold. The sky seemed unusually clear, as if for the first time in years, the stars were visible. Maybe they had always been there. Maybe I had simply stopped looking up. In the parking lot, Brenda waited, leaning against her car. The moment she saw me, she hurried forward and wrapped me in her arms. I didn't hold anything back. I finally let myself collapse into her embrace. I cried, not only from the ache of confronting my son, but from the overwhelming relief of finally speaking truth after years of silence. Relief from no longer shrinking myself to maintain a fragile peace. Relief from choosing my own worth for the first time in decades. "You did it," Brenda whispered, her voice warm with pride. "I'm so proud of you." We stayed like that for a long time before my tears finally subsided. She followed me home to make sure I arrived safely. My little house, the one Marcus avoided, the one Serena criticized, looked different that night. The same walls, the same furniture, the same quiet. Yet everything felt shifted, as though I had taken back a piece of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I made tea and sat on the old sofa Rob used to read his newspaper on. Brenda sat beside me until I was ready to speak. "Do you think I was too harsh?" I finally asked. "No," she said firmly. "You were fair. There's a world of difference between being harsh and refusing to accept mistreatment." The following days felt surreal. My phone rang constantly. Marcus called several times a day, leaving long voicemails filled with apologies, explanations, hopes. Serena called too, her voice shifting between sincere regret and thinly veiled desperation. For the first week, I ignored them all. I needed quiet. I needed space. I needed to let decades of buried hurt rise and finally settle. Tony kept me updated on the restaurant. Apparently, word had traveled fast through the city's business circles. Reporters reached out asking for interviews. I declined every request. This wasn't a headline. It wasn't gossip. It was my life, my family, my heart. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. A handwritten letter. Not a text, not an email. Real ink on real paper. It was from Marcus. My hands trembled as I opened it. His words felt different, more honest, more vulnerable than anything he had said in years. He wrote about starting therapy, about the conversations he and Serena were having about values, kindness, raising their son differently. He wrote about selling the luxury condo, moving somewhere reasonable, taking a real job. He wrote about wanting Elias to learn respect, not the kind that comes from status, but the kind that comes from treating every person with dignity. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask me to undo the inheritance changes. He simply asked if there was a chance, even a small one, to rebuild a real relationship. I cried reading it, not from sadness, from something more complex, a mix of caution, hope, love, and self-protection. I wrote back with a letter of my own. I told him his words meant something, but that long-term actions would mean more. I said I was willing to try, slowly, carefully, with boundaries, with honesty, brick by brick, if he truly meant it, and most importantly, I told him I wanted to truly know my grandson, not through photos or distant updates, but in person as part of his life. A month later we met for coffee. A neutral place, not my restaurant, not their part of the city, just the three of us. The conversation was awkward at first, heavy silences, forced small talk, but there was something different in their eyes. Less showmanship, more sincerity. Serena apologized. No excuses, no performances, just accountability. I didn't forgive her immediately. Forgiveness is not a switch, it's a process. But I acknowledged the effort. Marcus talked about his new job, stable, modest, honest work. He said he felt lighter, as if letting go of the image he tried so hard to maintain had set him free. He described how he was talking to Elias even at 2 years old, about kindness and respect. And then, 3 months after that night in the restaurant, I finally met my grandson properly. They invited me to a public park, neutral ground again. Elias ran around the swings, laughing freely in the sunshine. When he saw me, he hesitated. Why wouldn't he? I was a stranger, but Marcus knelt down and pointed toward me. Elias, sweetheart, this is your grandma, Eleanor. She knitted that scarf you love. I had kept knitting for him, even when I wasn't allowed to see him. I never expected him to know. Elias looked at me with wide, curious eyes. Then, with the pure instinctive trust only a child possesses, he ran straight toward me. He wrapped his tiny arms around my legs, and in that moment, after years of silence, distance, and hurt, something inside me finally healed. I felt my heart break open and stitch itself back together all at once. We spent the afternoon playing, Elias showing me how to climb the slide, how to swing higher, how to search for tiny insects under the rocks. Marcus and Serena watched from a nearby bench, giving us space while still staying close. As the sun dipped low, Elias grew sleepy in my arms, his head warm and heavy on my shoulder. "Grandma, you smell nice?" he murmured. Such simple words. Yet they meant more than any apology. They meant possibility, a future, a new beginning. Rebuilding wasn't easy, it was slow, sometimes uncomfortable. Old patterns tried to creep back in, but something had shifted, something deep, honest, and real. Marcus began visiting regularly, not to ask for anything, but just to be present. He wanted to hear about my day. He wanted stories about his father's stories he had never cared about before. Now he listened with reverence. Serena surprised me most. She approached me humbly, asking about the business, not to imitate, but to genuinely learn what she had never been taught. Honor, resilience, responsibility. 6 months later, on my 67th birthday, Marcus organized a small dinner. Not in a fancy venue, but in my home. He cooked the meal himself, using recipes he had learned as a little boy. Serena brought market flowers, simple and beautiful. Elias handed me a crayon drawing of the two of us. I hung it on my refrigerator, where it still remains. That night, after Elias fell asleep on my old sofa, Marcus took my hand. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on us, for giving us the chance to change." I squeezed his hand. "And thank you," I said, "for choosing real change instead of just talking about it." Now, 2 years after that night in the restaurant, my life is both familiar and transformed. I still live in my modest home. I still drive my old car. I still dress simply. But now Marcus understands those choices are rooted in values, not lack. I still manage my restaurants. Sometimes Marcus joins me for meetings, not to inherit anything, but to understand the legacy his father and I built with our own hands. Serena now works with a real charity organization, using her online skills to genuinely help people, and Elias, my sweet boy, comes to my home twice a week. We bake cookies, I tell him stories about his grandfather, and I teach him that a person's worth is in their heart and their actions, not in their clothes or their address. The reconciliation didn't erase the past. The scars are still there. There are days when it aches, days when caution sits beside love, but there are also genuine smiles, real conversations, moments of growth, connection, and warmth. I learned that boundaries are not cruelty, that respect is not optional, that dignity is not something you surrender for the sake of harmony. And I learned that it is never too late to show even to grown children that every human being deserves kindness, no matter their bank account or wardrobe. That night at the restaurant changed everything. Not because I revealed what I owned, but because I revealed who I was. My worth was never tied to the size of my business or the balance of my accounts. It was in my humanity, my dignity, my right to be treated with respect. Rob would have been proud, not of the restaurants, but of the woman who finally defended herself when it mattered most. I still dine at that same restaurant, sometimes alone, enjoying the quiet, sometimes with Brenda, celebrating our lifelong friendship, and sometimes with Marcus, Serena, and Elias, creating new memories atop the ashes of the old ones. Respect is not inherited. It's learned, it's chosen, and it must be protected, especially when it hurts, because in the end, the one thing no one can take from you is your dignity, unless you hand it away. Did you enjoy this story? And tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to meet you in the comments. If the story touched your heart, you can support the channel by sending a super thanks. It helps me keep creating more stories like this for you. I'm excited to read your thoughts. On the screen now, you'll find 2 more life stories I highly recommend. There are many more waiting for you on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.